Hi, everyone. Welcome to Soul Speak. I'm Talya Pardo. I'm an editor, life coach, mentor, and it's my great pleasure to welcome today Tara Campbell. She's a fellow healer, and we're going to have a great conversation about life's journey and healing. She works in the field of soul embodiment for healing connections and inner transformations, which is incredible, and quantum healing, which I'm very excited to hear about. But she started off very different, doing yoga and creating yoga retreats in South America. So from there to back to Canada and working individually with clients in quantum healing, that must have been an incredible journey. So I'll kick it off with asking Tara to maybe tell us a little bit about where you started, what you were doing, how you got into even creating yoga retreats. That in itself sounds quite incredible in South America, which is a whole other world. And maybe the influence that had on you and where you are today.
Hi, Talya. Yeah, thank you so much for having me today.
My pleasure.
And yeah, it's fascinating and quite a journey for sure when I start to think about like where I started and what I'm doing now. And so, I began living in South America when I was running adventure travel tours. And so it was never really a plan that I was going to be doing these things. So when I was in university and younger, I had an interest in travel, but I actually studied anthropology, environmental studies, and I was very much interested in culture and nature. And then all of a sudden I was offered this job to work in Peru for 1 year as a adventure tour leader after my degree in environmental studies. And I thought, wow. And I was doing I had done field work in Costa Rica for my master's degree in environmental education. And I was speaking Spanish and working with medicinal plants. And I really loved all of that. So when I was offered this job, just casually, accidentally, looking for something else, I thought, wow, 1 year working in Peru, leading adventure tours, that sounds like fun. So that's kind of how it all started. And then I was brought to Peru and working for, it was a really large Canadian travel company, even to this day. And it was a few decades ago. So it was kind of fresh for a lot of travel and kind of making our way around South America. So that's how I ended up there.
Okay. And what kind of tours did you lead? What did you show people, or, what did they go see? What did the tourists go see?
Yeah, wonderful. So in Peru, we would see Machu Picchu and hike the Inca Trail. So I was doing that like once a month. And
wow.
The adventure travel tours were like 2 or 3 weeks, and we would go across, Peru, Bolivia, and then I ended up going to Mexico and working in like the Mayan Riviera region and into Guatemala. Yeah, so it was just one of those jobs that, yeah, you sound like, wow, this is like a dream job, and I mean, in some ways it was, but there was also a lot of personal pressure and sacrifice involved in that kind of lifestyle. And it was addictive in some ways. Yeah.
Right. I imagine the personal pressure is your time is not your own when you're on these tours.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. And it's full like group harmonizing and serving others, but also just the thrill of it all was taking people through new regions. So I was super ecstatic about all of that. And I was just very lively and enjoyed that part of the job. Right. But at the same time, I thought, okay, well, I'm going to start to, focus on environmental studies and get back into a real job. And that was kind of always what happened to me throughout my life. And so I returned to Canada many times, and I would work with a herbalist friend in his shop making medicine at times. And then I was working, actually, I thought I should get a real job. And I worked as an environmental consultant in Mexico for a mining company, which was kind of a collaboration of everything else I was doing in terms of living in a Spanish country, developing education programs, working with local communities. And that was a huge shift for me as well, working in the corporate industry, mining industry. So that was a huge lesson. And then I learned a lot there and thought, okay, this is what this corporate world is like in rural Mexico. And I kind of put myself in extreme situations without really being aware of that. And
Right.
yeah, I learned a lot. And then eventually I was still leading tours and coming back and forth from Latin America. And I should mention as well that, you know, yoga has always been part of my life ever since I was really young, like in my teens. And I had been studying yoga kind of my whole life. And so when I was doing all this adventure travel, I would then study yoga and do a teacher training. And then eventually, yeah, I'm like, Tara, like, how can you like really do something that you really want? And I thought I would just bring it all together. And I wanted to maybe work with other people to run yoga retreats. So I started, I guess, like in 2012, right? So
Wow. It's
about
a good
10
10
years
years
ago
ago. Yeah.
now. Yeah, it's funny how time flies.
Mhm.
And then I was just decided, okay, let's do something you've never done before. And I thought I can try and just run yoga retreats in Brazil. And that's where I started. And because I had the network of travel and putting itineraries together, I thought, okay, I can do that. And I'm a yoga teacher. I've been doing a lot of yoga. And I just felt all of those things kind of come together for me.
It's so amazing when the different experiences we go through in our lives serve to create our future, right? Like we don't realize, while you were in the mining company, or, you were doing the adventure travel, how could you have projected that that would have all supported, your creation of these yoga retreats? I just wanted to comment on something interesting that you said though, because before you were like, I want to get a real job. And it's so interesting that you characterize, like you made that distinction because to my ear and to maybe, some of our listeners, this adventure travel, lifestyle seems like a really solid and incredible job, right? Working in a mining company, and you said you were creating education programs. So you were doing that through the mining company, like, or for the communities that it served.
Exactly. They had
Okay.
hired me to be the nice face and, oh, this
Mm,
is our contribution to the community. And I
right.
was the environmental consultant and doing environmental education with the local schools,
Right.
and then reforestation and all, and
Beautiful.
like studying medicinal plants in the area. Like it was like, that was a
you
really
you
interesting
really put
experience.
together such a beautiful, like everything that you've told that you do or you were doing is really such a beautiful accumulation is not the word, I guess, integration of your different interests, right? Like working with the medicine, the plant medicines and the herbalists and education and teaching. And I don't know. It's so funny when you say real, like it stuck in my head when you said real job. I'm like, I don't know. You're doing some pretty amazing things. How that wasn't, how you didn't see it as incredible contributions to people's lives, or maybe you did, but you had your own characterization of what a real job should be. It's interesting. But
Thank
please,
you.
like,
Yeah.
I'm loving your story. I
Yeah.
think
Well,
it's
thank
so
you for
rich.
bringing that to attention. And I fully recognize what I said. And
Yeah,
just to highlight, when you're, leading adventure tours, and I did it for almost 10 years. So
it's
I was,
amazing.
and that's why, and I ended up like in beautiful, amazing places. I even worked on a ship in Antarctica, like they
Wow.
pulled me in the last minute. And I think when I said real job is, there's such a transitory nature to that work
Okay.
that
Right.
really kind of affects your stability in life. And
Right.
so, and you're always serving others as well. So you
Mm,
almost don't feel that you have that grounding. And that is exactly the story of my life, is I chose that. And that's what I mean by, okay, let's try to stabilize here, maybe live in one place.
right. No, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah,
Of course, that makes a lot of
yeah,
sense.
yeah.
Absolutely. And so then you started creating these yoga retreats in Brazil. So Brazil is very different from the rest of South America. I mean, I know the difference is mainly language, right? I
Yeah.
mean, Portuguese versus Spanish. So what made you choose Brazil as opposed to the other places you had been more frequently?
Yeah, wonderful question. So I was in Canada, and my travel company had called me. They were looking for a tour leader, and I was also teaching English in Canada and just figuring out what to do my next
Mm,
step. And then I'm like, they were like, okay, well, do you want to go to Costa Rica, Mexico, or Brazil? And I was like, okay, well, I'll just run a few tours in Brazil, right? I'm like, okay. So then I went to Brazil again, and I really felt a connection there. There was something about the liveliness
Mm.
of South America that I was always just drawn to. And then I just had this, it was like an idea. It's like, okay, well, Tara, why don't you try, I had locations, why don't you try and do this in Brazil? And I ended up living, and I decided to try it out. And then a few things happened, I met a boyfriend that kind of kept me there. And I felt a little bit of stabilization and support for a few years. And then eventually, like, we kind of separated. And during that whole time, I had become more confident in my ability to move around in Portuguese
Right.
and live in Rio de Janeiro, which definitely is a wild kind of country and place. And
Right.
and I just started slowly keeping my focus. And so I was there for about 6 years, like over 6 years, and
Wow.
things just seemed to be working out. And slowly I just was started and ran one retreat and then another retreat, and then things were moving in that way. And I kind of loved all of it. Yeah.
That's incredible. You really spent, it seems like you gravitated to and flourished in a place that, from my never having been to South America, it feels like it's a place that's very earthy and full of life and connected to while connected to some kind of earth spirit, like that there's some other spiritual element that they remember there, or that they honor, that somehow gets lost a little bit up here North America. Right.
Yeah, I mean, this is a fascinating topic, Talya, and I would often ask myself, why am I here? Like, how am I here, gringa, and 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 doing this? And then, but I have, I mean, I don't know how to explain the passion and fire of Brazil. I mean, there's a connection to the land. There's the multicultural.
Mm.
The Italians, the Portuguese, the European influence, of course, the African influence, all mixed and living together. And then the land is a very strong, vibrant land connected to the ocean, of course, the
Right.
tropical forest, the Amazon. So yeah, there is a hot spot. And also during the time I was there, Brazil was really in a buildup. I mean, there was a lot of expats there. It was hosting the World Cup. It was hosting the
Right.
Olympics. It was at a point in its history where people felt this momentum and economic growth. And there was a lot of expats kind of living there. And then, of course, also why I left is it suffered an economic crash and some
Mm.
political problems surfaced, affecting
Right.
everything I was doing as well. And I was planning on coming back to Canada at that point soon anyway. So
Okay.
I was able to also witness that change in the society of the powerful nature of Brazil, this economic powerhouse, which it really is, and the diversity that it stands for. But amid all of the scandals and issues of a lot of countries that aren't in the north, or as you say,
Mm.
up here,
Okay.
I was part of all of that. And then it was
Amazing.
time for me to come to Canada, and that's when a lot of things just started to change for me. And so it certainly affected my consciousness and my ability in life, right?
Oh, absolutely. And that was going to be the next question I was going to ask you, is if you wouldn't mind sharing about this transformation now from that lifestyle and living in that world and culture to coming back to Canada and changing what you do. Because you could theoretically say you could have easily just taken what you did in Brazil, how to create yoga retreats, that there's definitely a community and demand out there for it. You could have just continued to replicate it where you are, which is also absolutely beautiful land wise and all of that. So
Mhm.
what made your change into doing something different, into quantum healing now and breath work and
Yeah,
changing your
wonderful. Yeah, it was surprising for me too. I
mm,
I had no idea. So I came back to Canada, and I was again, the company, to be honest, was growing a little bit bigger than I could handle.
okay.
And I had stretched myself out way too far.
Right.
And then I was going through these personal changes internally, like a lot of things came up for me in the time when I came back to Canada, and I wasn't very grounded because I
Mm,
was a little bit of a hustler. as we become as
Right.
entrepreneurs, as a woman, I think. And I really overextended myself in a lot of ways. And the travel agency was just on hold, but there was like this energetic pump to it. And I
Mm.
think I didn't have the strong foundation I thought I did. So things were just on hold generally. And I was just kind of managing a few things in Canada and just going really slow. And I was teaching and ready to, oh, one day I'll just pick it up again. And I actually started to partner with somebody in 2020, early 2020.
Okay.
And I thought, okay, I'll just continue here and keep going because it was something I had put so much energy into. It was something I could do, and there was a demand for it. So 2020, I had this arrangement with this amazing travel agency. We're going to work together. And I was like, okay, but I knew, like, I just felt internally like something, I
Mm.
knew something just wasn't solid, right?
Right.
Funnily enough, and as we all have experienced the last
Mm.
few years, all that went on hold. And then I began to, I was teaching yoga in downtown Vancouver, and and I met a woman, and we started to become friends, and she was like an intuitive energy healer. And I thought, oh yeah, that's nice. And when you work and live in kind of the yoga world for so long,
Mm.
and you come across many things, and something called to me in this meeting with her. And I mean, I've always been intuitive and empath and super sensitive, and I think I've always used that to my advantage in my jobs.
Right.
But I never thought, oh, Tara, you should be doing this on a higher level. But so strangely enough, as life continues in 2020, I had some changes as I was moving locations again, and I ended up living at my friend's cabin on Vancouver Island.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and I was isolated. I'm like, okay, I was isolated. I was lucky that my friend had this place, and I said in September, because I knew I was teaching and doing all these things online. And all of a sudden, make a long story short, I'm living in this cabin, and I knew I needed to kind of expand my skill set in a new way as well, because the yoga retreats were amazing, but also I just felt, yeah, there's something else going on. Strangely enough, I met this woman, and then I started to explore options, and I connected with this other amazing course that was happening the next day about quantum
Mm.
healing.
Ooh.
And I signed up. I'm like, I'm going to take that course. It was like October
That's
2020. I'm living alone in a cabin in a forest on Vancouver Island. My everything
amazing.
has stopped. And now all of a sudden I'm going into a quantum healing training. And that's the best way I can summarize that.
That's and so, but that's sometimes the way, the universe redirects us kind of to
Mhm.
where our new path is, right? You said the original plan with the travel agency, you kind of didn't have the most positive feeling about it moving forward, and lo and behold, it was put on hold, right? And then, one thing leads you to another. I find that the universe has done that for many people. So just explain a little bit, maybe, please, if you could, about quantum healing. Like, what is it exactly, to some who don't know?
Yeah,
For
thanks.
some who don't know.
Okay. So
Yeah.
quantum healing, I mean, this whole world quantum, people are like, what's
Yeah.
that? Right? So the quantum field is really when I begin a session, for example, we'll say, okay, imagine a place where all healing can take place. So this quantum field then kind of connects us to that place within all of us, and that exists, that allows us to open up to restructuring our previous timelines, our
Mm.
emotional templates. So quantum healing essentially is also very different from yoga. And
Right.
I'll just try to make that comparison to help
Hmm.
me bridge this discussion and this connection. Is that, in yoga, I use my body energetically. We're doing poses, we're doing meditations, we're doing breath work, and that's my comfort zone. Quantum healing is actually consciousness, right? So we're connecting also with higher self,
Mm.
and this is done in a session where people are able to feel safe and then protected, and then we connect with our emotions of an experience. So, for example, perhaps there's a pattern in your life where you're feeling that you're stuck, or there's some emotion that you can consistently feel that, oh, I'm not worthy
Right.
enough, I have trust issues, I'm I'm too demanding, whatever a pattern you have, we'll then kind of address that emotional memory in a session. And then we'll try and identify the emotions, and working within the energy of your body, which we actually use their breath to inhale and then clear some of these emotions. And then we call in like a higher self, or what's also called a multidimensional self, where quite surprisingly, or not surprisingly, people can easily connect to, because this higher self, and I've studied yoga for over 20 years, and while we do study the higher self, do we really connect to it? Not so much. We connect to gurus, or we connect to a posture, or we connect to a goal, but a higher self is what in quantum healing can be referred to as the inner observer. Right? So everyone has an inner observer. So for example, imagine you're writing something on a piece of paper on your desk, and anyone can easily visualize, an inner observer during that process.
Yeah.
Right. And so this is kind of where we then tap into, and then what happens is a person is able to receive information from their higher self, because we've opened up a safe space for that exploration.
That's really beautiful. Would you consider that to be comparable to intuition? Or is it a different, area of the self?
You mean for the person, the person
Right.
in the session?
Yes, right? Like,
Yeah.
so connecting to the higher self, would you compare that to when someone, can communicate or kind of hear their intuition and be able to be guided by it?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. I mean, intuition sometimes, like, for example, I want to make it clear that what I love about this healing is like, I'm not an energy healer. Like, I am actually not doing the energy healing or anything like that. I'm just holding space and guiding a person.
Right.
So when a person is able to access that inner observer, their higher self, it is a form of intuition, but it is more of what, if I were to expand on this even higher, is that we connect basically to what we all have, which is an original divine blueprint of our souls.
Yes.
Yeah,
Right.
and this is quantum healing. So,
Okay.
for example, in my life, and with my stories and my Brazil experience and the yoga retreats, and I was carrying a lot of trauma as well. I was operating in places of how I think I should operate, or I'm in this culture,
Right.
I'll do this. So I mean, every person, we all have our patterns of behavior, our way of operating in the world. When we access like our original blueprint, we're actually accessing parts of us that is whole and complete, of like, that does not represent our trauma patterns or our storytelling that we think we tell ourselves. We're actually able to feel this context of wholeness.
That's incredible. So you're able to bring people to that space where then they can navigate through and find solutions for challenges that they're facing. Right. Is it, I mean, we all, what I've learned myself in my own work, on my self work, my inner work, and with clients is really the answers are found within you. We're all seeking the answers outside, and everybody needs guides, I find, right? But the guides aren't there to give you the answer. The guides are there to help you find the answer from within, because only you can answer your own questions. So that's essentially the kind of experience that a client is going to have with you, is that you're going to guide them to hearing the true blueprint of their soul, guiding them through the challenges they're facing at that moment in their life.
Lovely. Yes. And I thank you. And also, why is that? And I've had this discussion with a client I had a while ago. Like, for example, a person will say to me, why don't I feel this way when I'm by myself? Why, and because I always say, it's not me. Like, I'm just guiding you in the process. And I believe through this work, I've also learned that, through reflection, like, we actually are very social beings. Only through reflection are we able to fully comprehend our own experience.
Oh, yeah.
When I hold a
Oof.
space for a person to access their sometimes deepest pain, because this work is only for people who are ready to do deep dives,
Yes,
and not everyone's ready for that, and that's
absolutely.
perfectly fine. So I just wanted to uh, highlight that. And so when a
Yeah,
person is kind of accessing their deep places, that it's like, well, through a reflective process, they're able to then be witnessed. And it's through
right.
this witnessing then that they're able to feel safe, protected, and then guided through the session as well as afterwards. Because we are social beings, you know?
Yes.
Yeah.
We are, and yet at the same time, we all need that connection with self to feel complete, right? And that's
Mhm.
the guidance and the mirroring. I mean, I've seen my own experiences just in my life that before I even kind of came into the mentoring and coaching world was, I saw awareness comes with that mirroring in our relationship. So I saw myself in my children because I started to see their behavior, and some, it doesn't click for everybody, but it started to click for me, like, oh, that's me. That is not something that I'm proud of, right? So it's time for me, and that, spurred me to start really working on myself. Same
Mm.
thing with my relationship. My boyfriend is an incredible mirror for me. And has been quite a catalyst in my own personal growth, not because he's sitting there advising me on anything at all. The opposite. He holds the space and allows me to, and mirrors my attitudes or the things I say, and kind of makes me ask myself, is this really what's important to me? Is this really the core or the source of my the real core of my reaction? Or where do he causes me to reflect back on myself and examine and unpack my own emotions. And so that's kind of in everyday life, and I'm sure everybody has those people in their
Mhm.
lives, right? If we're able to be aware of that. And with quantum healing, with guides, you can do that with yourself, for yourself, with a guide in your life, right? That's what people
Yeah.
come to you for, right? Yeah. No,
Yeah.
it's really, mirroring is such an important uh avenue for growth, if
Yeah.
we're
It's also
able to.
just holding space for a person as well, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's the
Yeah. And so,
silence
yeah. And
sometimes
usually,
even.
for example, these sessions as well, I mean, they're usually like 90 minutes to 2 hours, and they're quite
Mm,
profound. And so
I'm
we
sure.
only do one session every 2 weeks because there is an emotional processing after the
Absolutely.
session.
Sure, sure.
And I do give, like, we offer follow-up session, like follow-up imprintings where you're imprinting the positive emotions from what came up
Okay.
as we learn to retrain the patterns in our mind. So if we had a really bad memory when we were young,
Mm,
we would then, and then we had another beautiful thing about these healing sessions, which I personally love, and that's why I support this work, is because we don't just open up pain and, oh, that's
mhm,
what happened to you. I'm sorry. Let's talk about that next session. We actually, like, we call in the ability to imprint and see positivity, like new emotions.
mm,
It's like the healing band-aid from within that we then imprint after for up to 2 weeks or however long a person needs. And then that's where these psychological shifts come in our consciousness, right?
absolutely.
Yeah,
Sure.
and this is all in a lot of mindset work, coaching work, and all of this, how to train your mind. And that's also what I love and kind of also new for me. But the quantum healing works on the emotional level, the physical level. And
Mm,
I think also in terms of intuition, like, I help guide people and just hold that space where I then able to, I'll be emotionally attuned to the person. I'll say, okay, this person's not ready to move forward right now.
mhm,
Let's do this breathing one more time. Or this person is ready to move forward. Okay. And so in that sense, for me as the quantum healer, I'm very tuned into a person on this in the session, to understand emotionally, are they able to keep going, right? And okay, how are they feeling? And that
Right.
is also, I feel, where I've connected my yoga experience, my adventure travel, because I have this ability to like drive people and inspire people and take people into the unknown in 3D.
Right.
And now I feel that in this work that I started in 2020, I'm like, oh, I'm going to launch people in their consciousness and help support them in that journey through their emotional patterns and their consciousness. And that for me, I feel is where and even though I never thought I would be doing this, I'm really grateful. And I've learned now that, okay, I'm going to transfer all those skills to this work where real deep healing can take place, where on a level that I wasn't even aware of, for example, 5 years ago.
But it seems like your path has always been to be a teacher and a guide in one form or another, right? And you've evolved, like your form of teaching and guidance has evolved with you, right? It's from the 3D into spiritual and soul consciousness, with the experience you've gained. So it resonates with such a beautiful depth and rightness when you talk about it, and when I hear your story I was so excited to have you on, because your story is just it's so enthralling to me to see the journey and the like germination of this seed of a person who's meant to be a guide and a teacher from something that's also unconventional. There's not many people out there that I know that have been, have done everything that you've done, right? And then brought themselves into really being able to guide people on their own healing journey. So it's really incredible. It makes me think of I don't remember if we discussed it when we first spoke, the book How to Lose Your Mind and Create a New One by Dr. Joe Dispenza.
Exactly. Well, that was the book I was going to recommend, was the Joe Dispenza.
Okay, so we can actually do that now. Okay, but that's fantastic. That's great. I love that book.
Dispenza, he has an amazing story, and he has worked, he guides in the quantum and all of that. And please go ahead. Yeah.
No, well, you know what? So we're kind of coming a bit to the end of the time. I don't, so that would have actually been my next lead in, but I want to thank you first for your story and for sharing what you do. I really hope that this resonates with the audience and that there are people who reach out to you, because you have just such a wonderful energy, and I know that you're bringing good things to people. So I want to thank you for being on my show and for sharing yourself with me today and with us, the audience that's going to see it. And so the next thing that I ask, what I've been doing is creating a book list of recommendations from each of my guests on the show, and it's posted on a website called bookshop.org, which supports independent booksellers in the US. I'm hoping that I've seen like comments on their website about how eventually they'll open up in Canada as well. So I'm kind of trying to support them so that they get to us too. But what they do is if people order through their site, they funnel the order to a nearby independent bookseller, which supports the indie booksellers. So, that's my little connection to my editing world also. So all that to say is that, would you like to recommend a book for our audience that has been impactful for you and that you think that people will be interested in? So please go ahead. And it'll be on I'll be adding it.
Thank you. Yeah. So I was going to mention like any book by Dr. Joe Dispenza, who has a very interesting story about healing his own body through power of the mind. But it's more than just power of the mind. It's really just being able to shift our perspective and consciousness. And so he's very famous, all in relation to this topic. So any book by Dr. Joe Dispenza
that's really amazing. So to pick one, I'll put the one that I had mentioned, the How to Lose Your Mind and Create a New One, because he talks about when we refocus on the life we want or the feelings we want, if we can create a body experience of it, that's what helps to rewire the brain to believe that is actually the reality, and helps direct us to make decisions and change and adjust actions in the interest of getting us to those goals. Did I kind of got that right, I think.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, even with the healing work that I do now is, we do work with the chakra energy system because our body really is comprised of energy. So we'll work with like the root chakra and the heart. And because when people feel emotions that are blocked, in part of the sessions, we'll say, where are you feeling it? And then an emotion will be attached to a place. Oh, I feel, pain in my left shoulder, or I'll feel like fear in my gut. And this is what people just feel, and it does appear. And so this is where Dr. Joe Dispenza does, and this is where the connection really is within our physical body. And this is also why the healing is so beautiful, because we connect and clear out and become aware of places in our body, which is also what Dr. Joe Dispenza, who went through a serious injury and healed himself, right? And so, there's so many topics, and quantum healing, I think it's becoming more and more common, I hopefully it will become something that isn't so.
I think the more that people are gaining, and it seems to be that there is quite a movement towards a spiritual awakening, understanding the mind-body connection, rewiring the brain to be able to either move past trauma or change dysfunctional patterns. So I hopefully the more that wave continues, the closer they'll get to understanding quantum healing on a more broad-based level. So thank you so much. This has been the most wonderful conversation. I've really enjoyed myself. And I appreciate you being on today and taking the time to speak with me and to speak with the audience. And so I hope we can do this again sometime soon. And I want to thank you and wish you a wonderful day. And that's the last thing, of course. Please tell us how we can find you, Tara Campbell.
Oh, yeah, wonderful. So I have a website. It's called Awakened Integration. So awakenedintegration.ca. And I'm also developing social media. Amazing. And I have a meditation as well. People can sign up for and just get an idea of the sessions. But yeah, you can find me there, awakenedintegration.ca.
Awesome. So your link will be on the show notes, and I'll add in your Facebook link for your profile as well, if that's okay. Yeah, and so ways to reach Tara will be available on the show notes, and this show will be available on Everyday Woman TV as well as Anchor FM, and we'll be sharing the links to that. So I hope everybody enjoyed, and I thank you again, Tara, and wish you a wonderful day.
Thank you so much, Talya.
Thank you.